Now is the time for our service for our sermon, which will be delivered by Etta Zasloff, a beloved member of our congregation.
So, thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. Hold the mic. Okay, is that better? Okay. I really appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate being asked very much to do this today. It's definitely within my wheelhouse, although it was a huge extra burden this past week to do this, but it came across.
Thank you.
So, just wanted to let you know that. So give me a second here to get this Word document up. I'm not depending on the internet.
Put the mic even closer.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, hold up one second. Here we go. Let's hope it shows up, or I'll have to do it from memory. I think it's here. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so wasn't yesterday wonderful? So many of you showed up, it was great, unbelievable. The remarkable thing is that I felt like it was filled with joy, even though we were there protesting bad things that are going on in the world. It definitely felt like joy to me, and I could feel it in the whole crowd. So were we celebrating something like a holiday, a birthday, commemorating a historical event? No. We were saying no to a king in protest of our present government's actions. The joy for me came from the crowd that showed up, which some have estimated to be at least 3,000 in Westerly, which is huge. And our Henry Penelope Sunflower and other costume participants raised the level of enthusiasm of the crowd. The joy was contagious. It was uplifting to see so many people who actually realize what is happening, because many do not. We were willing to get up, stand up in broad daylight to dissent, unlike our original dissenters in America who, under the dark of night, threw the tea into the bay. We were out there in the daylight doing it, and I think that needs to be commemorated. It was a totally peaceful event with full police cooperation, and they assured everyone's safety, which felt good to all of us. Fear for our safety, though, the day before was really palatable among all of us. Even Friday night when we were here getting ready at the community dinner, we could feel it. But we buoyed each other and said, we're going to do it. We have to go through with it, even with all of the threats and the rhetoric that were accusing us of being haters and whatever. We stayed the mark and did it. And I would just like to say that faith and fear cannot occupy the same space. I'm not saying that people of faith don't experience fear. We all experience fear. But faith is what helps us manage fear, however it comes to us. I see fear, especially in this situation, presenting itself as a reaction to the unknown. What will happen if I do this? How will I go on after this tragedy? What's next? What will people say? Will it really make a difference? Will I get on a target list? These fearful thoughts can be quite troubling and even paralyzing. Some may need professional help even to overcome debilitating, irrational, fearful thinking. But sometimes fear is an excuse to look away and to pass up opportunities to act, or to follow through on our first impulse to do something and be shocked by an action, but we pass it up and we pass up those opportunities to do something about injustice, unfairness, and cruelty in the world. It takes faith to respond with action. The government in America has taken a dark turn. Where did I go? Here we go. In the past few months, a majority of us have reeled from the great American experiment in democracy being trashed. We're feeling fear of what is coming at us at such a pace that it's hard to even comprehend what is happening right before our eyes. I'm reminded of a popular song by Passenger. You might recognize the words. And the song suggests that we really never know what we have until we lose it. He says, well, you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. America is her. Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Only hate the road when you're missing home. And only know you love her when you let her go. We can't let her go. So I cite this song not because I think it describes what's happening, but I think it is a song that strikes at the heart of an activist who never gives up. One who reaches out to the community to organize resistance against the generalized fear that we are all feeling. I think that the story at this point of Florence Nightingale is very relatable. She is best known for creating the profession of modern nursing, founded many hospitals, trained tens of thousands of nurses, and initiated many other social reforms. She revolutionized healthcare across the whole of society, and at the same time wrote many, many books. I couldn't believe when I looked it up how many. And how she had time to do all that, I have no idea. I wrote one book and it took my whole life, every second of that year, and yeah, it takes a lot. So her endless energy became known as Nightingale power. And what was the source of that energy and devotion to do all that she did? It was more than energy that defined her. She dared to speak truth to power and got away with it. She was deeply spiritual, which is rarely discussed. She actually, of all those many books that she wrote, several of them were specifically on Christian mysticism, in which she challenged the predominant thinking of the time. The great scholar of mysticism, Evelyn Underhill, called her one of the greatest and most balanced thinkers of the 19th century, based on her books. As an inkling into her psyche, Underhill cites this remarkable quote from one of her books. Heaven is neither a place nor a time. There might be a heaven, not only here, but now. Where shall I find God? In myself, she answered. This is the true mystical doctrine. Now, I know we've all talked about the mystical doctrine, and I'm like, I had to look it up. I wanted to make sure I knew what it's talking about. Did you know that it actually starts with the story of the virgin birth of Jesus? I didn't remember that. But after being reminded, I do recall from my Baptist religious education that the story of Elizabeth and Zachariah having pined for a child and finally, very late in life, miraculously having a son. I recalled that story once this was presented to me. He was known as John the Baptist, who then prophesied the miraculous birth of Jesus to Mary. The story develops eventually into the belief in Jesus as the only way to get to heaven. So Miss Nightingale's famous quote rebukes this story. Heaven is neither a place nor a time. There might be a heaven not only here but now. Where shall I find God? In myself. That is the true mystical doctrine. So I'm sure this statement left the leaders of the Church of England, where she belonged, puzzled at the very least. And I think her conclusion that heaven is here and now was the source of her energy and devotion to nursing and to social change. I imagine that when she experienced a small success, it kind of fed her bravery and she just carried on. And she was able to accomplish amazing things because of it. And not seeing Jesus' death as this atonement for all sin, she instead focused on his life as an example of how humans could live in harmony with each other and God. She was a devoted Christian, but also a keen observer of the natural world. And she supported science. She questioned the mystical dogma based on her lived experience as a nurse, but she maintained her belief in God. Two things can be true, two opposing things can be true at the same time. I see her life as a model for activism, as a spiritual act, and evidence that we can each be selective in our own spirituality. We can question what doesn't make sense to us and react accordingly. When we call our senators and representatives, when we march, when we protest, when we volunteer, when we donate, when we organize, when we listen, when we post on social media. So I want to tell you a little story, bring you into here and now. Enough about Florence for a moment. Recently, a small group of South County Rising activists, and it just happened to be we were all women, were loading my car with leftover signs from a protest. We were the only ones in the parking lot at the Richmond Town Hall, feeling tired, but also buoyed by the success of the event, much like we felt yesterday, when two motorcyclists drove into the lot and parked pretty close to us. We immediately took note, kind of perked up, and we didn't express it, but we were all thinking, oh, here comes trouble. And that's based on our lived experience of most of the motorcycles that went by during our protests were, doing opposing things, obviously showing us their dissent at what we were doing. So they were not on Harleys, and I think that kept us a little bit calmer. Nothing against Harleys. They were like on Yamaha, kind of small bike. So we weren't that threatened, but we were curious. So they parked nearby us and immediately removed their dark face covering helmets and walked up to us, smiling, two handsome young men. They introduced themselves by first name and obviously wanted to talk. So I had to paraphrase this because I'm remembering it from fairly recently. We drove by here earlier and saw you guys out there with signs and stuff. We want to know what's going on. So we were on our way home from work and we decided to get on our bikes and drive back over here from North Kingstown. That's where they were from, they told us later. So they must have been very interested and have had some kind of a mission. We've seen some other protests like this and just are wondering what's going on. So of course we engaged with them and they listened politely as we rambled nervously, mostly about the big beautiful bill because that's what that protest was following immediately, which had just been passed into law. And then one of them, they listened politely to our spiel. All four of us had a little something to say. And finally, there was a pause and one of them spoke up and said, well, we support Trump. I haven't heard anything of what you're saying about the big beautiful bill. We are, I'm a carpenter, the one who was speaking, and I feel like immigrants are taking our construction jobs. And I appreciate the tax cuts that we got. That's basically the message that they had. So one of us pointed out that the tax cuts were predominantly helping the rich get richer and cutting important services for most people. And, they really just looked at us in disbelief. So the conversation was going back and forth, but polite. And then when it turned to immigration, they favored deporting all immigrants, whether they were criminals or not, which sounded like it came right from the right-wing news silo that they obviously were in. They really felt like immigrants were stealing their jobs, and they, elaborated on that. So before the conversation became argumentative, his friend interrupted and pivoted the conversation to Jesus. Again, I'm paraphrasing, he says, I just want to say, what you people seem to be is about politics. And he takes his hands down around his knees, which is down here on this earthly place, implying that it was a bad place to be. And we are here with a story for you about Jesus who can raise you up into the heavens. Which was kind of shocking to hear that statement come out so clearly like that, but I couldn't let it go, of course. So I responded and said, you know what I learned about Jesus? And I said, I was raised in the church and in a faith community. I think of him as someone who taught love for everyone, including to strangers, the sick, and the forlorn. And I think Jesus would prefer us to be down here working, down here, and I'm like doing the motions too. I think Jesus would prefer us to be down here working for justice for common people, even immigrants, who are just trying to survive and support their families like the rest of us. Well, they didn't really buy into it, but they took that as a sign to leave. They politely thanked us and put their helmets back on and drove away. We breathed a sigh of relief. And gratefulness that we had survived that encounter, which was really the first one that many of us, I've had them before, but the other three people had never had a direct encounter with a Trumper that was willing to talk civilly. So, we kind of debriefed that and went on, hoping that maybe after speaking to us, they might just turn the channel. I don't know. But those young men were right. We were about politics, not religion. We were about the shared power of we the people. And we're out there legally defending our democracy, protesting against the actions of our president and the unconstitutional, cruel, and dictatorial executive orders. Later, as I reflected on that interaction, I remembered being taught that politics and religion don't mix. I'm sure you've all heard that before. So, especially in conversation, in laws, in schools, doesn't mix. But this very overused phrase describes our dilemma. It is complicated. The very mix of the two contributes to the polarization of America with the power to govern over who's going to be the winner. On one side, the Christian religion is used to miraculously solve all of our problems and justify the casualties that are occurring without remorse and in total disregard for human lives or living conditions. On the other side are the thinkers, like Florence Nightingale, who are saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Christianity and truly all mainstream religions teach being gracious and helpful to strangers, tending the sick, friending the forlorn, honoring patience, gathering in community, and finally trusting in a spirit of love that encompasses all of us. After all, many of us have heard the phrase, God is love. So what are we doing? Then there's the middle. Those who hesitate to choose a side. While I respect their willingness to explore arguments on both sides, I do find it hard in this moment to understand why people of faith are hesitating. As a person of faith, this mixing of religion and government is what drives my activism against the present administration and gives me energy to carry on. The path is long and hard, and there is no easy way out. I like how Valerie Carr, an American activist, lawyer, documentary, filmmaker, educator, mother, and faith leader, offers another way to look at this situation. She asks, what if? What if the darkness in our country right now and in the world is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if all who have pushed through the fire before us are whispering in our ears, you are brave, you are brave? What if this is our time of great transition? For in this very moment, it feels like the world is on fire. We see the rise of far-right-wing supremacist movements in our nation and around the world, propping up demagogues, mainstreaming nativism, undermining democracies. Every notion of truth is politicized, while America wrestles with a massive demographic transition at the same time. People of color are predicted to exceed the number of white people soon, and that obviously is threatening to some. Is this darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? Activists are the midwives in this great time of transition, tasked with birthing a new future for all of us. We have thousands of years of scriptures and stories and songs inspiring us to show up to the labor of justice with love and courage. Will we birth a nation that has never been? A nation that is multiracial, multi-faith, multi-gendered, multicultural, a nation where power is shared and we strive to protect the dignity of every person? Or will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war, a power struggle against those who envision a past where a certain class of white people hold cultural, economic, and political domain? That is the question that has no easy answer in one religion or in one man. The fierce and demanding and imperfect labor for justice lasts a lifetime, but we know it is life-giving. So breathe and push, the midwife says. Breathe in love, push out fear. Breathe with the earth and the sky and the sea. Breathe with the music and movement and meditation every day. Let joy in to try to remind us of everything good and beautiful and worth fighting for. Let there be peace.